This is Defiance Daily, dispatches for the defiant. I am your host, Miles Taylor. I am in the back of a car, yes, because this team is committed every single day to telling you about the abuses of power in Donald Trump's Washington, even if that means traffic prevents me from getting to a normal place. We are going to do this conversation from the back of a vehicle right now. And why? Because today is a very important day. Today marks 1 year into Donald Trump's second administration. Now, for some of you, it's a celebration that we are a fourth of the way through the madness. For others, the glass is 3/4 empty because there is still a lot more to come. Now, today, there are a lot of things we could reflect on about Donald Trump's first year back in office. But I will lead with just saying today, we will point out the lawless things that he is undertaking, from efforts to use military force outside the United States against allies and inside the United States against American citizens, and what that means for this country. Donald Trump held a press conference today where he attempted to boast about his year one accomplishments, but a special side-by-side showed why it was the opposite. Not a boast, but a moment of somber reflection for a lot of Americans, including when it comes to their bank accounts. Like I said, we will also talk about the latest of what's happening in Minnesota, who made a surprise appearance there, and what it means for that state and for the rest of the country. And then stay with us today, because the answer to our regular segment, Who is Joining the Defiance, is a group of students who, despite all the intimidation and pressure in Trump's America, did something very, very bold today. Also with us, we have Larry Krasner, district attorney in the city of Philadelphia. If you were with us last week, you probably saw his clip where he warned Donald Trump and Trump's ICE that if they came into Philadelphia, they better watch out, they better comply with the law, or Larry Krasner in the city are going to sue them. He will be with us today to have that conversation. Stay tuned for that. This is Defiance Daily, dispatches for the defiant. We start today with that press conference that Donald Trump had. Donald Trump at this press conference tried to allay the nerves of people around the country by talking about his accomplishments since his inauguration 1 year ago. He even brought forward a little packet for people who were in attendance to brag about his accomplishments. That press conference, by the way, was scheduled at the exact same time as the nationwide walkout that happened in protest of Donald Trump at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Tirelessly and predictably so, Donald Trump used this press conference to push a narrative of economic prosperity in the United States, painting Americans as celebrating this moment. The same Americans who are watching Donald Trump on TV who can't afford groceries. However, those numbers do not lie. And as a recent YouGov poll showed yesterday, we'll take a look.
But by the way, we've had the best stock market in history, the best 401ks in history, and we inherited a mess. The numbers that we inherited were way up, and now we brought them, almost all of them, way down. We brought them way down.
Yes. He says maybe we've got bad PR people. If you take the president at his word, he spent his first year in office cleaning up an economic mess left behind by Democrats. But just 18% of Americans, that is less than 1 in 5, say they are better off than they were a year ago. They told CBS News pollsters the Trump presidency has made them feel uneasy, frustrated, and unsafe, exhausted even. And 3/4 of Americans think the president isn't putting enough focus on lowering prices.
Americans feel exhausted and unsafe, and we're going to get to the unsafe part in just a second. But let me just hone in on the exhausted part, especially economically. As we're having this conversation, I can see the notes that my producer is making, and she writes, I would just like to point out that I went to the store to buy limes, lemons, cilantro, a box of pasta, and ginger, and it cost me $30. That is Donald Trump's America. We all have that experience now every single week. And Donald Trump can no longer say that it was the Biden administration that led to an explosion in inflation in this country. Why? Because Donald Trump has made tariffs, taxes on goods, one of the centerpieces of his presidency. So much so that his administration has touted these tariffs as a massive accomplishment that's somehow remaking the American economy to our benefit, when anyone who's taken an Econ 101 class knows that a tariff is just a tax that makes goods more expensive. Americans are seeing that at the grocery store again and again, and Donald Trump has struggled to break free of that narrative. But let's go to that second piece that was referenced in that poll, the fact that Americans feel less and less safe. And this week, they have even more reason to feel that way because the president of the United States continues to up the ante when it comes to not a hostile foreign enemy, but an American ally, Greenland, a territory of Denmark that Donald Trump continues to fantasize about taking over by force. Now, during that speech, you saw that Donald Trump boasted about the stock market. Unfortunately for him, the visual showed a different story. And before we get to Greenland, let me just hit that note. Director of Economic Policy at Beta Partners, Henriette Treyz, explains what was happening during Donald Trump's speech. I want you to pay attention in the middle bottom right of the screen, and then we'll get back to Greenland.
The Dow is also down 1.75%, down 860 or so points today. Why is it dropping, Henrietta?
Yeah, I was just watching the president's press briefing, and oftentimes you'll see a president come out and try to calm temperatures. This is a direct result of the president's desire to annex Greenland, which is flipping out all of the EU, the UK, Canada, driving these huge trading partners of the United States into the open and waiting arms of China. And that's what's sending bond markets through the roof today. Good luck getting a mortgage right now, and tanking the stock market. The president is behaving too erratically for both the equities and the bond markets. And so this press briefing doesn't seem to me about addressing affordability issues domestically. If he's trying to calm anything, it's the markets. I stopped watching just a moment ago as I came on here, but he hasn't mentioned Greenland. He's been focused on immigration and domestic policies. This is about talking about and wheeling back or dialing back the rhetoric that he's been using on Greenland that is causing extreme problems internationally for the entirety of the United States.
And he does mention Greenland. We'll get to that a little bit later. But look, the big takeaway there, as the president is trying to reassure Americans about his economy, the stock ticker right there on the screen, the Dow going down, going into the red, and in part because, as that segment noted, people are terrified that Donald Trump is detonating one of the foundations of American security in the post-World War II era, and that is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which has been under siege by a Donald Trump who wants to go seize part of NATO territory. I will tell you, from the first term of the Trump administration, when I first heard Donald Trump talking about taking Greenland, this is something that American officials worried about. Big picture, people like John Kelly, who became White House chief of staff, worried that Donald Trump on any given day might announce that the United States was pulling out of NATO, the type of thing that we knew had the potential to make markets tank and to make America less safe. Meanwhile, today, in Greenland, Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen stated in a news conference in Nuuk today that a military invasion is not likely, but it cannot be ruled out, announcing a new government task force and guidance urging households to store at least 5 days of food. Now, this, according to Bloomberg News, is something that the people of Greenland are not necessarily taking to mean everything's going to be okay. When you get told to store at least 5 days of food by your leader, that's a signal that you don't know that you're not going to be invaded. So for all intents and purposes, right now, America's allies just across the Atlantic are preparing for the possibility of U.S. invasion. Let that sink in, folks. Not our enemies, not our adversaries, our friends are preparing for the possibility that we might invade them. Despite this very clear rebuke by Greenland, Donald Trump refused to rule out taking over the territory from Denmark. Take a listen to that.
How far are you willing to go to acquire Greenland?
You'll find out.
President, you said you're confident something's going to get worked out in Greenland, but Greenlanders have made it clear they don't want to be part of the U.S.
Well,
what gives the U.S. the right to take away that self-determination?
When I speak to them, I'm sure they'll be thrilled.
Not only have Greenlanders made clear that they don't want to be a part of the United States, Americans have made clear that they don't agree with the president's efforts to seize the territory of a NATO ally. According to a CNN poll, more than 75% of Americans have made clear they do not agree with the president. Hardly 75% of Americans agree on anything. This is extremely significant. And of course, let's focus on that last piece with my co-founder of Defiance.org, Xander Schultz. The president says, you will see in terms of what's going to happen next with Greenland. Xander, what do you make of all of this? This was not a press conference today that I think reassured the American people that Donald Trump and his administration are a paragon of stability.
Yeah, felt a little bit foreboding, I think is the word I would use. I hadn't seen that clip actually until you just played it. That was terrifying. The whole narrative that the Trump administration is using on why we must capture Greenland, conquer Greenland to protect Greenland is so insane, where they say they can't protect themselves. Miles, if you're a small country and you need to protect yourself from great foreign powers, what would you do? Would you say form an alliance with other powerful nations, such as the United States, to protect yourself? Greenland already took all the steps to protect itself against Russia and China. And now all of a sudden they have to essentially become a 51st state to be protected. It's just, I mean, I know these guys are lying all the time. And so there's no sense holding up a mirror to their bullshit, but it's just so disrespectful to our intelligence, the everyday person's intelligence, that somehow this is a winning narrative that no one was speaking about as of 2 weeks ago. And now half the country is supposed to believe it.
Not just an affront to our intelligence. I will say, Xander, this is a threat to American intelligence. And what do I mean by that? We depend on our NATO allies more than anyone in the world to understand what is happening in the world. And I want to bring people into that. I mean, I used to start every single day at the Department of Homeland Security, first thing in the morning. At like 5:30 a.m., I would get there to read the morning intelligence briefs. That drove the whole day. What threat information are we getting? Bad people who are trying to sneak in to conduct a terrorist attack on Americans, a threat to U.S. forces overseas, whatever it was, on every given day. There was something in there, if not multiple things there in my intelligence reports that we depended on from a foreign ally, allies who were giving us information to literally save the lives of our citizens. Right. And now in the wake of the president's threats against Europe and the president's overall lawlessness, we've got European allies that are cutting off intelligence sharing with the United States. So if you are listening to this and you think, I think it's bad and stupid that the president wants to go into Greenland, it doesn't affect me, you're wrong. This affects you in a lot of different ways. Not only is the president turning it into a trade war, things you buy are going to become more expensive because he's throwing a tantrum, but your life is at greater risk because we have got countries shutting off intelligence sharing with the United States. Great Britain is an example of a country that has now started to limit intelligence sharing with the United States because of Donald Trump's lawlessness overseas. This is a big concern for us. And so I think that's one of the things, Xander, in the coming weeks, people are going to start to understand is Donald Trump's quest to take over this island that's relatively sparsely populated has big implications for the United States and our future.
Yeah, it feels like, we're joining the 2026 Axis powers. It feels like a bizarro version of World War II where Russia and America are squeezing Europe, but we're the bad guys this time around. It's really sad. It is nice to see. It seems like Europe learned its lesson from the Munich appeasement. The European powers famously kind of let Hitler take a piece of Czechoslovakia, and Neville Chamberlain went home and celebrated and said, this is peace for all. We've made a great decision here. And then 2 months later, Hitler took the rest of Czechoslovakia. So it does feel like Europe has learned its lesson from that. It's nice seeing them put their foot down because I think at the end of the day, and you know him much better than I do, I just have a sense from afar, Trump is a bully, and bullies don't like doing things the hard way and don't want things done the hard way. And Trump knows at the end of the day, an escalation war with Europe will not be popular at home. War in general is not popular. Trump ran on no more forever wars. So I hope this serves as the deterrent. It likely will be.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Here's one of the things that's really beneficial about new media, Xander, which is that we don't have to stay on a script here and we could bring some realness into the conversation. I am in the parking lot of a Wawa because of crazy traffic and I didn't get to where I wanted to get. And just before we hopped on, one of the reasons I was late hopping on is I ran into some folks in the Wawa who wanted to thank Defiance.org for what we have been doing. And the very kind gentleman asked me something to the effect of, how do you keep doing what you are doing? And look, implicit in that question is that there's not a lot of upsides to me personally to continue to fight against the president. He's already come after me. He wants to make things hard for my family. But I will tell you, this news story that we are talking about, Greenland, this is one of the things that is keeping me in this fight. This is one of the reasons I decided to dig into my savings to stay in the fight against Donald Trump until the end of his administration, is because he is blowing up the world as we know it. I mean, after that first administration, when I left, there's a reason that one of the first things that I disclosed was the crazy shit that Donald Trump was saying about Greenland. Because even though at the time people shrugged it off, they're like, that's silly. Donald Trump wants to go take this island. It was obvious to a lot of us in the administration, that's not silly. That's very scary. Even if Greenland doesn't have a lot of people, if Donald Trump comes back into office and starts talking about taking that territory, it could set off a chain reaction that ruins the NATO alliance. Here we are. That is happening. That's why I'm in this fight, because we shouldn't let that happen helplessly. There are things we can do about it. And one of the questions I want to pose to you, Xander, is, before we jump to our next story, what kinds of things do you think that we should be considering doing, whether it's as an organization, whether it's the public writ large, to signal that it's not okay that our president is deviating from what 3/4 of Americans want and potentially blowing up the NATO alliance?
And
I'm not asking you to feel like things we might be talking about doing, but
no. I know what you're saying. We're having an honest conversation. You talk about fighting, I feel like I'm fighting for my life now. I feel like I'm fighting so we can peacefully resolve this thing and use our institutions, our systems to resolve it. Because I know, I am not going to watch my black and brown neighbors get fucking walked into boxcars. Not going to do it. Not going to happen. I'm going to organize and resist that too. And so that gets a lot more messy doing it that way. I'd way rather do it this way. I'd way rather organize, disrupt, whatever we have to disrupt collectively to get that done. But if it goes into that next phase, my grandpa fought in World War II. I'm not going to let some Nazis, go grab my neighbors. We have the 1930s Germany to reflect on. We know what's coming. We have the advantage of that to the Germans. And so we got to fight tooth and nail. But, you're a parent to a young girl. My daughter's, turning 3 next week. I don't want to die. My dad died when I was young. I want to raise my kid. But, I'm willing to do that for my neighbors if that's what it takes. So I feel like doing this with you. Excuse me.
I feel you, man. I mean, look, Americans feel that way right now. They are watching all of this happening and saying, I have given so much for my country. How am I going to let this go down? And, you, Xander, have, I think, made the point very powerfully through the years that we have a lot to learn as a country when it comes to the nonviolent resistance of movements that have come before us. This is not a period where we have to reinvent the wheel. There is a playbook out there for how to push back. And I would say, before we get to this next segment, I want to throw it back to you for a second. The people of Minnesota are showing us that. I mean, that's one of the things that's a silver lining right now. Things look really dark, but the people of Minnesota are showing us, here is how you resist in a nonviolent and peaceful way, but that's also defiant as hell.
100%. I'm so happy you said we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We're moving from phase 1 to phase 2 of the resistance. Phase 1 being peaceful and non-disruptive. We're going to go march on Saturday. It's going to be a show of support. We're going to make our voice heard, etc. We are moving into, and really the Free America walkout and some of the stuff we're seeing in Minneapolis is kind of the beginning of that, phase 2, which is we are going to have to be collectively disruptive. You can still be peaceful and collectively disruptive. A lot of the civil rights movement were those types of actions, right? Whether it's Rosa Parks sitting on the front of the bus or the sit-ins, etc. But we are going to, and then of course, what some of the unions orchestrated strikes. I'm really excited to have the leader of the Sunrise Movement on in a couple of days to talk to us about their tactics, and leadership from SEIU, a major union, to talk about their tactics. How do we strike well? How do we strike effectively? How do we use leverage, Now we're starting to have to figure out how we use leverage. And to your point, there's a whole playbook around this, and we're going to start embracing those strategies as we move forward.
Yeah. Well, look, that takes me into Minnesota, and we're going to bring in our guest to talk about this in a moment. But I will just say there's a bit of news out of Minnesota, which is, of course, Attorney General Pam Bondi made a surprise visit to the state and threatened to come down hard on protesters who went into a Minnesota church this in hopes of confronting David Easterwood, a pastor at the church who's affiliated with ICE. Well, today, Bondi, in that unannounced trip to Minneapolis, subpoenaed state government officials, creating a huge news story. And during that trip, she also subpoenaed at least 5 other individuals, including Mayor Jacob Fry, St. Paul Mayor Coley Herr, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and the Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. Now, the Department of Justice cites the investigation as being into whether Minnesota leaders, quote, obstructed federal immigration enforcement efforts. And Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison said his office received a subpoena for records and documents related to their work with respect to federal immigration enforcement, but not him personally. The subpoena was highly irregular, he said, especially after his office filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration last week. To talk about this and everything else that's happening in Minnesota, we bring on one of the nation's boldest prosecutors, Larry Krasner of Philadelphia. Larry, welcome to the program. And my co-founder, Xander, will pop back onto the screen here. How are you doing, my friend?
Larry, I think you're on mute.
Oh, there we go. I said I wore the baseball hat just for you.
I can't imagine. For a second, Larry, I was like, there's no way this guy doesn't have a voice, because we heard his voice so loudly last week nationwide, daring this administration not to come for Philadelphia.
Well, you know, I think it's what we all need to do. I've been listening to your conversation here for about the last 15 minutes. And when you talk about the horrific mistakes that were made during the Second World War, you talk about Neville Chamberlain, appeasement. You guys should be defiant. I think the work that you're doing is very important. And I think all of us together collectively are going to win this, but we're only going to win this if we go hard. And if we go directly at someone who is, you know, not only Hitler-esque, but actually sort of like an infantile Hitler.
That's a great way to put it.
Could not have put it better. Larry, I want to ask you a quick question from my end and then turn it over to Xander, which is, look, what do you make of how Minnesota is responding to this? I mean, I was so thrilled to see how the Attorney General has taken the legal fight to the administration. But I was also taken with your message the other week when you came forward and said, look, you know, we're going to have to go on legal offense against these guys because it is so obvious to any American who's watching this that federal agents are breaking the law. I used to help oversee ICE. Mostly, there are a lot of people inside the ICE bureaucracy that just want to do the right thing. But you know what? We got a lot of evidence of people doing the wrong thing and breaking the law over and over. So is Minnesota doing what they need to do? And how could they ratchet up the legal offense against the administration?
Well, I mean, the good news is you have an excellent prosecutor in Minneapolis itself. She doesn't get a lot of attention, but she should. Her name is Mary Moriarty. She's got a lot of guts, and she's paid the price for being a reform prosecutor who is willing to hold law enforcement accountable in an even-handed way. Obviously, you know, some of the other players here also have a backbone, and we've seen that from the Attorney General. We've certainly seen it from the mayor of Minneapolis, who I think has been an excellent communicator on those points. So there are people who are standing up. But I think more than anything else, the lesson out of Minneapolis is that people who are not insiders and who are not famous are standing up. All those people who came outside before the murder, and it is murder, of Renee Nicole Good, who had whistles around their necks, who blew the whistles, who stood out there and took video, not only video before that murder, but video after the murder. That tells you something about the level of resistance that we are seeing from ordinary Americans who believe in democracy and believe that they should have their lives, they should have their rights, and that we should act the way we all acted before there was a Trump.
Larry, first of all, it's so nice to see you here. You know, in my criminal justice reform circles, you're a bit of an idol and a mentor to so many district attorneys across the country. I wonder, as we start organizing from the outside, you know, Miles and I are focused on the collective action of the individuals. what should we be asking of our DAs, and how should we be working with our local officials in law enforcement together? What are the partnerships that are possible that are maybe we haven't thought about before because we haven't had to deal with this type of threat?
Well, I think one of the major problems here is if we look at national media, they don't necessarily understand the law, and they are going for all of these fraudulent representations of the law and what it permits. J.D. Vance is a lawyer. J.D. Vance is also a liar. When he says that there is absolute immunity for federal officers, that is an absolute lie, and it always has been. So before you ask your local officials to do the right thing, it might be good to make sure they know what the right thing is. This is the right thing. If federal law enforcement commits crimes, they can.
Oh, we might have a frozen Larry. We'll see if he unfreezes.
Or a big buildup to the answer.
Yeah,
one or the other, or dramatic buildup to the answer.
Almost.
Well, who knows, Miles? The guy in the back of the car wasn't the guy with the connectivity issues. That was
I know.
Well
who
done.
knew?
I was worried about
Look,
you.
this will go down as one of the more interesting locations in which we've done the episode, Xander.
I mean, unless it gets worse, we might be in caves.
Yeah, this episode of Defiance Daily, sponsored by Wawa. Surprising, I know. No, Wawa will deny that. It's
Good
not.
sandwiches, though.
But if I stay here long enough, it might be. There's cars getting towed from here right now, so I hope that's not me. But I will continue to do the broadcast, even if this car gets towed right now. We'll go all the way to the impoundment lot if that happens. When we get
Miles,
Larry back.
I wanted to, while we wait for Larry, I wanted to circle back on, because I didn't get to comment on it earlier, the affordability conversation that we were having at the top. You talked about the tariffs being a tax on Americans. It's true. And the trade-off that we were supposed to get was reshoring of manufacturing. That's what we were sold, right? Is that, hey, globalization has been bad for all these different parts of the country, especially the Rust Belt, which voted for Trump this last election cycle universally, right? He swept the Rust Belt. I'm going to tariff these other manufacturing places, so prices will go up, but so will build in America again. That hasn't happened at all. So all we're getting is higher prices. We are not getting, better jobs back in the country. And so that's an important point to make, that he hasn't accomplished his goal there. And I hear Larry's back. So we'll bring Larry back.
I want to pick that one back up, but Larry's back into the conversation. Larry, you are here, my friend. You got us. Thumbs up?
Thumbs up. That was all courtesy of Vladimir Putin, but thumbs up.
It wasn't liking where we were going.
He doesn't want us to have the conversation. Well, look, this guy that I want to prompt you to respond to, Larry, is in his own right very Putin-esque. I'm going to play a clip of a man many Americans have gotten to know, and that's a DHS border commander named Greg Bovino, and he spoke at a press conference in the Twin Cities, and I want you to hear what he had to say. He played the role of victim, Larry, and I want to get your response to it on the back end.
Question. We've been in many cities, as you know. We've been in Los Angeles, Chicago, Charlotte, New Orleans, and now obviously Minneapolis. So what we've seen that's a bit different here is the organization of some of the groups. The groups are a bit better organized. They've got some excellent communications, and that coupled with a very poor response from the mayor and the governor, those two things coupled together make that a difficult operating environment at times. And the reason I say that is it just came from Operation Catahoula Crunch there in Louisiana, in which state and locals, including the governor, the mayors, the police chief, worked in close concert for us to do what my colleague here, Marcus Charles, said, and that's remove violent offenders, bad people and bad things from the streets. And in doing that, I had one act of violence against Border Patrol, one notable act of violence against Border Patrol in a month. Here, I've lost count. I've already lost count of how many. It's that collusion and corruption between elected officials and these anarchists that are intent on creating violence for law enforcement.
Let me get your response to that, Larry. And then in a few moments, I'm going to show you another clip of what those officials are actually doing in Minnesota. But what do you make of Bovino going out there and trying to paint ICE as the victims? You know, ICE is being unfairly assailed. We're just here to pick up criminal aliens, even though the data shows that 9 in 10 people they are picking up don't have a criminal record.
You know, it's just repulsive at every level. It's pretty typical war on the truth that you see coming from fascists. And these are fascists. That's what they are. That's who they are. That's what they're up to. They constantly do things that are illegal, that are evil, that are unconstitutional. And then they project onto people who defy them that somehow those are the people engaging in illegal activity. It's, you know, it's exactly what it appears to be. It's someone who's unfit to be in law enforcement at all, leading things in ways that are inappropriate and illegal. Don't go to Minnesota and murder people. Just don't do it. And then you won't have to come up with fantasy stories about how it's all the fault of anarchists. This whole country saw what they saw in a different kind of way with Derek Chauvin. They saw injustice. They saw evil. They saw untruth. They saw a young woman whose last name was Good turning to people whose conduct was evil and saying, "I'm not mad at you," before she was shot to death, after which the person who shot her called her an F and B. You know, I mean, we all know how to interpret that. They simply cannot talk their ways out of it, because we are dealing with a country that's going to trust its eyes and its ears on that video before it's going to trust the ridiculous version of events that we're getting from Pam Bondi and we're getting from Bovino.
What gave away the fascist thing? The fact that Bovino's dressed exactly like Joseph Goebbels? Like, when did that start? He's dressed exactly like a Nazi. It's freaking crazy.
That was a hint, I must admit. I would say his haircut furthers the picture. And then there's his tossing all sorts of, all sorts of weapons of war into peaceful protest. You know, it's,
yeah.
I mean, what can I say? Bull Connor lives.
Larry, when we got, when the connection got dropped last time, we were asking you specifically, one, what should we be asking of our DAs and other local law enforcement leaders? And how should we be teaming with them? What is like what is the golden version of a partnership between the anarchists and the local officials, as Bovino would put it?
Well, I don't give rules to anarchists because anarchists don't believe in rules, and I'm not sure I believe too much in anarchists in the United States. There just aren't. This is all in the land of Antifa. You know, it's like the Easter Bunny theory of domestic terrorism. No Easter Bunny. What is this? I think we should be worried about Pro-Fa, not Antifa. But what should we be asking? I mean, it's very simple. You're a law enforcement officer, Mr., Ms., local DA. And therefore, under state law, you prosecute crimes. We'll do it when it's law enforcement, whether it's local law enforcement or federal law enforcement. Do it. It's your oath. It's your obligation. You're obliged to seek justice. So bring local charges, put the handcuffs on the people who do it, put them in a jail cell, try the case in front of a jury and get them convicted. The only aspect of what that no good liar, J.D. Vance, said that is true is that there's this skinny little kind of immunity that in a case that is not nearly this serious might have a slight effect. But if I bring charges and we arrest someone for doing in Philly what was already done in Minnesota, I'm the one who's going to be trying that case, either in state court or in federal court. I'm the one who's going to be getting that conviction. And oh, trust me, a Minneapolis jury is not going to like what they saw there at all. We've already seen how they convicted Derek Chauvin for what he did to George Floyd. And understand this, because this is the most important point. We really, as state prosecutors, have more power than federal prosecutors because our convictions are not pardonable by the president of the United States. If you ever wondered why Donald Trump has 30 plus felony convictions and has not been pardoned, it's because the president has no power to pardon a state court conviction. All the J6ers, if they had been convicted in state court, they'd still be in jail. And they could not be pardoned. So this is not some sort of hypothetical, theoretical, let's impeach him again and lose again. This is real power. These are real teeth. And people locally should be turning to their prosecutor saying, I want a public commitment from you that if federal officers commit crimes, you're going to put them in jail for it, and you're going to take them to trial for it, and you're going to do everything in your power to convict them. Because when you do that, they will do every day of their sentence, and they cannot be pardoned.
Well, Larry, to that end, you bring up something very important in your answer, which is you're talking about this this issue that the administration, the president and the vice president are telling these agents they have total authorization to do whatever they want. They have absolute immunity. And that's the problem here, is the lawlessness. Now, there's a separate debate, and a very important debate, that the administration is trying to deport everyone when they told us instead they were going to come into office and deport criminal aliens. There's a legitimate, huge debate around the immigration enforcement priorities of this administration. But this whole second debate that's emerged because we see daily a pattern of ICE officers breaking the law, violating DHS protocol, and that's a whole other category. They can't just do warrantless searches and arrest American citizens, and they are. I want to play you a quick clip because we just saw another U.S. citizen arrested and taken out of his home on Sunday, and that video made the rounds on social media. And here's that individual responding.
They pointed a gun to me and my daughter-in-law, and then they told me to come out here without my clothes on, and then they just handcuffed me right there. My grandson watched everything. After they took me, he was crying, looking for me. They drove me all the way to Minneapolis, I don't know where. My son grabbed my ID, showing to them. They just said, okay, you're good. So they freed me. And they didn't say anything. They didn't say sorry or anything. They just, okay, you're good. They just laughed.
Do not talk to them!
Larry, American citizens are being ripped from their homes. This is not legal. This is all about the lawlessness of what ICE is doing. Take that example, for instance. What is the recourse of someone who is pulled out of their home? They're a U.S. citizen. What can they do? I mean, I know you don't necessarily know all the facts and circumstances in that case, but this has got to smack people as a very clear violation of this individual's perhaps Fourth Amendment rights, Fifth Amendment rights to due process. I mean, these are just glaring cases almost every day.
They are. And I mean, there are some civil remedies that should be available. I used to, prior to becoming DA in Philly, I used to be a civil rights lawyer, and I also did criminal defense for 30 years. So you have 42 USC section 1983, which allows individuals to go after law enforcement when acting supposedly within their office. They violate rights. You have lawsuits, but you also have local criminal laws that prohibit some of these things. Obviously, honest mistakes can occur. And when you're talking about criminal law, an honest mistake is usually not in play. But I suspect what we're looking at here is either intentional or wildly reckless without regard. And when you get into that kind of time zone, in most jurisdictions, there is a crime, and it is called unlawful restraint. And it's a crime that can be committed by law enforcement. There are other crimes: obstructing the administration of justice. If there has been fraudulent paperwork, phony paperwork, inadequate paperwork, et cetera, this can be a basis for prosecution. These are not just good ideas. These are criminal laws that do not allow anyone, including law enforcement, to run amok. You raised the point that you have the Vice President of the United States, a Yale law graduate, which means he knows better, lying to the public and saying there's absolute immunity. This is what a criminal organization does. You tell people, go ahead and kill people. There will be no recourse. You are absolutely immune. You tell them that knowing it's false. Why? Because you have taken what was previously at least a mostly professional law enforcement organization populated by decent human beings, and you have decided to make sure that your new recruits are a bunch of right-wing racists and that they are a bunch of people who are in some fashion unfit. I mean, there are even reports, I don't know if they're correct or not, but there's even reports that Enrique Tarrio, former head of the Proud Boys, who got a 20-ish year federal sentence and was pardoned, is now an ICE agent. Yeah, they are recruiting a Gestapo, and they are telling the Gestapo, do what you want. There will be no consequence. Oh, yes, there will. Oh, yes, there will. You try Alvin Bragg. You try me. You try Mary Moriarty. You try a number of the other prosecutors around the country who will actually keep their oath and who are aware of what the law is. And we'll be having this conversation when we're out of jail and you're in jail.
Well, Larry, I got one more question before we let you go here. At Defiance, we not only take collective action together, but we pool our funds and fund certain strategies and efforts. And I wonder, it's great hearing you say this. And I think something that would be great to see is you organizing DAs to do exactly what you're saying. I know, between our mutual friends, there are networks of these progressive DAs. And in most cities you have, or in a lot of cities, you have these progressive DAs that have modeled themselves after you in some way. Is there some sort of like interstate compact or effort that we should be aware of, or that you're leading to ensure not only that DAs are aware that these things are possible, these tools are possible, but they're actually doing these things?
There is no interstate compact to that effect. I think the idea is a great one. It could be as simple as doing a simultaneous nationwide press conference in which you have prosecutors who actually believe in doing their job, saying we will go after law enforcement, including federal law enforcement, in an even-handed way, consistent with the Constitution. And no, the president cannot pardon you for your crimes. I would love to participate in that. And if you would like to work together to make sure we get a lot of our reform colleagues to participate, that'd be great. Let's face it, this shouldn't just be a reform prosecutor thing. All prosecutors,
100%.
All prosecutors, even the most right-wing hardcore prosecutors who are honest prosecutors, took an oath to seek justice and to uphold the law and the Constitution of the United States, all of them. We should have all kinds of Republicans, all kinds of traditional prosecutors who say, hell no, don't come to my town and commit crimes, even if you're wearing an ICE badge. That's what we
it should be embarrassing to not join that compact. I'm with it, Larry. We're busy, you're busy, but I got time for this, man. Let's make sure it gets done. And we've got a bunch of friends to start that movement with. Miles and I are firing up something a week, so might as well do this too and add it to the list.
This is how we do business. We don't need to do 10 different meetings behind the scenes and focus groups. We just go live with thousands of people. We come up with a good idea and let's go.
Well, maybe those who are watching and listening will contact their local prosecutor and say, hey, I'd really love to see you do this. I'd really love to see you 100%. As a united front saying we actually believe in the law and the Constitution. We're going to protect this democracy. That is our job. We are not just DAs. We are democracy advocates. And I'm all in 100%. Let's do it.
Cool. I got my marching orders. Thank you, Larry. Thanks for coming on.
Larry Krasner for Attorney General, U.S. Attorney General. Anyway, we'll have that conversation at a later date.
Do I have to dye my hair blonde to do that? Or?
Yes, you do. Thank you, Larry. We appreciate it. We'll love to have you back.
All right. Thank you.
Later, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Truly a remarkable guy, Xander. I mean, like, this
100%.
He's got the energy that we need to see in this country to make sure that the lawless actions get held accountable. I just think he's a model for not just prosecutors, but public servants around the country.
I got 10 DAs on my short list now. Let's get that project out the door. We need it. We need to see our local officials saying we're not going to tolerate this. You're totally right. It's showing that video. What are we supposed to do? Why is this even happening once? Why are the usual mechanisms of our justice system, which are so happy to swoop up poor black kids on a corner, not in effect when we see our fourth, fifth constitutional right violated is maddening. And if we need that interstate compact, if Larry Krasner is willing to run it, then let's go build it.
Well, I'll just say this. I mean, this is a good moment to say to folks who are watching, if you are not in the club with us yet, and by the way, like, you can sign up at defiance.org for free to get our updates and see what we're up to and stay abreast of the news of this administration's abuses of power. But look, we're doing something more than that. I mean, Xander and I have given up our careers and a lot of our lives, as well as the rest of our team, to every single week go out there and do real things in response to this moment. And I'm glad we had Larry, because last week, what we urged members of defiance.org to do is exactly what he said: reach out to their DAs and local prosecutors to try to urge them to fight back against violations of state law. And guess what? A bunch of folks have. I've been thrilled to get those emails, Xander, of people that are members of defiance.org who've reached out to their DAs, who've reached out to the prosecutors to say, hey, start to do this. Now, there's more that we can do, as we just talked about, to try to stitch together those DAs to hold the federal government accountable when ICE agents are out there breaking the law. But there's other things we can do. As our producer just put up there on the screen, last week, we contributed to 2 organizations to help fund thousands more people, including in Minnesota, to know what their constitutional rights are and to document those abuses of power. The cell phone has become one of the most crucial tools in shining a light on what ICE is doing. If it were not for the people filming the murder of Renee Nicole Good, we would not have known the true story of what happened there that day. We would have just heard one side of that story from the administration, that it was a domestic terrorist attack, which anyone with two eyeballs, hell, anyone with one eyeball could see was absolutely not the case. So if you haven't yet, go to defiance.org, check us out, join us for free, or join the club of courageous Americans to help us every single week fight back against this. We're doing it. We've committed ourselves. Thousands of people around the country in all 50 states, by the way, have joined defiance.org to help in the effort. So come be a part of what we're trying to do here. And Xander, that leads me into the last segment of the day and every day, which is who is joining the Defiance. And we've gotten a loud and clear message from our members that they want to see more and more young people around this country get into the fight. And I'm so glad that they are. And we had an example today out of Georgia of students standing up against the madness and participating in this nationwide walkout. Take a look. Didn't look like terrorists to me, Xander. Didn't look like insurrectionists to me. Didn't look like anarchists. Looked like people exercising their constitutional rights to highlight the insanity that we are all witnessing.
On a Tuesday at 2 p.m. That's exactly what we need, right? We don't just keep going because it's normal and it feels wrong to disrupt our daily lives. We let this government know we are governed by consent and we reserve the right to withdraw that consent whenever we want. All we need to do is stay organized, and there's no way to overcome it. There was a great quote by like a British officer when they were trying to repress Gandhi's movement, and he said something to the effect of, "We knew how to deal with violence, and we knew how to commit violence. We had no idea how to deal with millions of people refusing to cooperate." And so, to your point you made earlier, there are lessons from history we can draw from. There's been people with far worse odds than us that have come out victorious, and it's nice to see us start moving with that spirit. I believe in Americans. I believe in America. At the end of the day, there is a real libertarian streak on the right and the left. We don't like to be told what the fuck to do. And I know he's captured a lot of the folks on the right now, but I don't think at the end of the day, the spirit of Americans will side with this type of control that he's trying to have on this country. So
you're absolutely right, man. I'm so glad to hear you say that. I mean, like, look, I get a lot of questions from people, like I said earlier, about the guy at the Wawa who's like, you know, why are you doing this? There's a lot of reasons being in this fight right now sucks. It's not what I want to be doing right now. I want to be growing a family and like not having to talk about any of this and going back into business and providing financial security for my family, blah, blah, blah. All those things.
At 5 a.m. every day.
Yeah. not just, I mean, we are burning the midnight oil on this, but you know what? Like, our country is fundamentally at risk. How could I not be doing this?
Yeah.
What would I feel like if, when you and I had that phone call in October, I'd instead been like, you know, man, I don't know. It's just too tough right now. Why don't we just let this thing slip away? How would I feel on the back end of that? No way. That's why I'm sitting in the back of a car in a parking lot, to make sure that we get our broadcast out there every single day, to make sure that we organize people every single day, because this matters. This is the country that I live in. This is the place that I was born into. This is the place that people have fought and died to preserve. This is the place that people go on a route where 1 in 3 young women are sexually assaulted because they see a better life coming to this country by taking that route. This is worth fighting for. This is absolutely worth it. And I'm thrilled to see students go out there and do that peacefully. And by the way, I note that they stepped out of the road as the police car came. They didn't turn it over or light it on fire. And then they drew a representation of what we should be doing in this country.
Right. I mean, look, I said earlier, I'd much rather do it this way. I don't want to hurt anyone either. Like I'd much rather welcome, ICE members, reformed ICE members with open arms and welcome them back to the vision of the country that we all share. No one who's ever been through conflict wishes they went through conflict. And so, we got to fight like hell peacefully while we can, and try to find a way back.
Yeah, I think that's right. Let's take a couple of questions from defiance.org members. Let's see. Jody asks, question, do people have any recourse against the feds for all the property damage? That's a great question. I wish we had asked Larry that. I can't give you advice as a lawyer. I mean, the short answer is yes. There are some very big cases, though, actually, that have worked their way through the courts. One of them just recently went to the Supreme Court about a case where the FBI broke into a house, and I think they handcuffed a bunch of family members. They destroyed a bunch of stuff in the home, only to find that the house they went into, it was the wrong people. It was the wrong suspects. They went into the wrong house. I think it was like one door away from where they were supposed to go into. And the federal government wasn't going to repay for any of the damage. This went all the way to the Supreme Court. I don't want to say I know what the outcome of that one was. I think the case was just decided, or the court is deciding the case. But that's an example of a major one that's gone to the courts. Law is being formed as we speak by some of these judicial decisions that impacts what ICE is doing as we speak. So my producer notes that Martin versus the United States is that case. So look that one up. But I mean, the short answer is that right now, a lot of those things are making their way through the judicial system. And unfortunately, that's something that my own family has actually had to worry about. My wife asked me last year, after this executive order in April, I know folks are getting tired of hearing me talk about that, but like that was one of the conversations that we had a month in. And she was like, okay, so if Donald Trump's federal agents come and raid our house and then rip through things and destroy things, like, are we going to get like paid back for that? Like, we can't afford to like renovate our house. We don't have a plan to renovate our house right now. But if they destroy our house, is someone going to reimburse us? And my comment to her was, in the immediate, absolutely not. And probably never. I mean, that's going to be hard to do. So that's just one more small thing that you don't see in all of this. All of these abuses of power by these federal agents have a tail that affect the lives of the innocent people who are hit.
Yeah, we got another question from Star. Yeesh, what happened to the "don't tread on me" people? They're being stomped on. It's a great question. I'll say, as part of my journey to go try to understand this better, I joined a gun club last year, and I even had to get an NRA membership, to believe it or not, to be a part of that gun club, because that's who insures the gun club. I'm also a member of the Socialist Rifle Association. I think I'm probably the only person who owns both those memberships. But I was talking to my gun club president yesterday. I met with them. These are older guys. And I asked them, look, I want you to think hard about where your line in the sand is, because I feel like you guys are in an information environment where you're learning that you're being taught what narrative you're supposed to have. And I get it. We also on the left push those guys so far into one political party. They're so entrenched in their gun rights arguments that it's hard to pull them then back away from that very same political party that's been the defenders of the gun rights that they're so passionate about. But I completely agree. They've lost the plot of this whole fighting against tyranny thing. The only thing I can say is our information environment. I've said this over and over again. We're going to talk about this tomorrow, because tomorrow we're covering the value of new media. The information environment is so not only toxic, but so siloed now. People aren't working with facts that you and I think are obvious. They're not seeing videos that we've all seen. We've lost the monoculture aspect of our society, and it is making things very, very challenging. But I told him, like, end of the week, I wanted an answer on where his line in the sand is before he would start organizing his community, where he could clearly identify tyranny and start organizing his community against it. So I'm excited to report back when I hear back from him. I'm going to see him again at the end of the week, and it's a great question. They've been AWOL so far.
Well, look, I will say this as someone who came, Star, from the sort of don't tread on me side of the political spectrum. I will say that's why I am fighting this fight. That's why a lot of disaffected Republicans are coming into this fight and why it's no longer, just the progressive left opposing what Donald Trump's doing. We have got a cross-partisan coalition forming in this country because there are a lot of other folks like me who are disaffected conservatives who said, wait a second, didn't we want to go into public policy for a smaller government that stayed out of our lives? And Donald Trump is building a government that in every way, shape, and form is inserting itself into our lives. He's telling us how to live, how to think. He's telling us what the prices are on our store shelves. He's telling us who he's comfortable running the companies that make the products on our store shelves. He's telling us what countries we can engage with and can't engage with. He's trying to dictate everything in American life. This is big government gone completely wild under Donald Trump, and that's ultimately what fascism looks like. So there is an opportunity, I think, here to recruit people across the political spectrum to be a part of this fight. And that's what's happening. Let's take a final question, then we got to jump. Kathy asks what the people say or ask to their local DAs. Kathy, one place I would point you to is this is one of the things we talked about last week on our weekly mission brief. If you go to defiance.news and you go down to the action section and watch last week's briefing or just read the recap, we ended up providing members, in addition to supporting the groups that we supported last week, we provided members with an email you can send to your local police chief and your local prosecutor, basically asking them what they are doing to help collect evidence against potential federal agents who violated the law in your area. That is something that you can send to police chiefs. Do they have an evidence collection portal if there are violations of the law that have been done by federal agents that people think that they have documented, but also to ask your DAs what their plan is if ICE agents come into your community or if they're already there and potentially engaged in some of these things like warrantless entry and arrest of U.S. citizens. What are those DAs doing? And we want them to get that pressure so things that we talked with Larry Krasner about can come to fruition, that we build that network of prosecutors across the country who understand best practices and who, again, understand how to peacefully, lawfully, and defiantly hold those agents accountable. Xander, anything else to add on that front other than people can go to defiance.news and find that information?
Well, if people want to jump on as beta testers too, let me see if I can find this window over here. We are beta testing Defiance HQ. I hope you can see this, where there is an actions tab where people can see exactly what to do based on what they learned on these briefings. So here's a good example of emailing your DA and tell them to stand up to ICE. We have recommended copy that you can click on and it auto-populates the email, etc. And so we're starting to build tools. This is still in beta. So if you do go to defiancehq.org, just know it's in beta. You're there to give me feedback. Things will be broken along the way, but we are building tools so people can easily see what actions to take. And it's fun. You get points for completing actions. You get points for inviting members. We have an all-time points list that I'm at the top of because I spent MLK Day just doing my Defiance action.
This was all just a way for you to be at the top of a gaming list. You couldn't be a successful gamer. You created a Defiance HQ. Well, let me say this. I've got to get back on the road. Glad to do this from our new studio in the back of a sedan, which is where we now film Defiance Daily episodes. Let me just say a big thank you to Larry Krasner for being with us. He was fantastic. Thank you to my colleague, Xander Schultz, as always, for providing moral clarity about this moment that we are in. Our producer, Mercedes O'Brien, who is remarkable. Folks, we are 1 year into the second Trump administration. Notionally, 3 more years to go. We got this. What did not exist a year ago was not just this organization, but the network of defiant people across this country who are fighting back. Thank you so much for what you are doing. Check us out at defiance.org. If you're meeting us for the first time, we would love to be in the fight with you. And as I always say, in the meantime, stay loud, stay brave, stay together, and join us tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern to find out what we are doing this week to push back against Trump's abuses of power. You will not want to miss this one. We have a big announcement tomorrow, something that we are doing in a few weeks that is going to have a very real impact on what Americans are hearing about this administration. So please join us tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for joining Defiance Daily.